Hi everyone, this is Ricki Spencer and welcome to another episode of Quest by Community Our Health Matters. And our health matters for a number of reasons. One, about who we are as an identity, where do we come from? And today, my guest, the wonderful Jesse Fleay, and we've also got Dr Stuart Ferrie. They are partners in life. They found each other at a time when they were both looking for something different, and they found it. And we're going to go into that wonderful world of being in a loving relationship, finding our soulmate, and also exploring areas of the Uluru Statement. We're going to be looking at constitutional law. What is it? Why is it important in the times of we're talking more about treaty? But we're also going to be talking about how do relationships foster in 2025? You know, what does it mean to be a queer couple? And what's it like to be a person who is an Indigenous identifying person, connected and falling in love with a non-Indigenous person? What are some of the challenges?
Thank you for having us on. The first thing I want to say is for people who are out there listening and who can relate to us or who can't relate to us, everything's relational and we're all connected. And I think that's the first principle that brings us together through love. So the Uluru Statement is the Uluru Statement from the heart. It's a message about love in a world that's really challenging. And it can be really difficult for all of us. I feel like, we often face our challenges. But at the end of the day, we communicate, we have a relationship, and we're related to the country that sustains us. This is not my home country, but I felt welcome here since I came here. And making sure that everything we do is about place, about value, about compassion. It's not actually hard. It's hard when you abandon those things.
When you met Jesse, what was it that attracted you or gravitated towards him?
He has a very magnetic personality. There's those kind of shared values as well that are really important. Those kind of things initially, and then developing a relationship from there.
And what was it like did you know that Jesse was an Indigenous man?
I think it came up very early in our conversations. It's something that Jesse holds very close to his heart.
Jesse, for you as a proud Noongar man, how important is that when you finished a relationship and you're moving on? Was it important for this relationship for the person to understand you?
All of us are looking to be understood and cared for, but I think what's more important is that I understand and that I find a way to see and value other people. And for me, it's about culture. Like, indigeneity is about race for a lot of people. It is obviously a big part of it, right? I've got Aboriginal heritage. I've got Nukanu heritage from South Australia in Port Augusta, and I've also got Noongar heritage in Western Australia where I was born. And it's about culture, and that culture teaches me that everyone has a place on country. Everyone can care for the land that sustains us. And Stuart is a scientist, so he understands what it is to be Noongar, like, more than anyone. And some of the work that's been done on Noongar country with scientists is some of the best work that we've had in generations. Professor Stephen Hopper, the scientist in Western Australia, for example, they've crossed bridges and stepped into our culture as allies and friends. And it's because scientists understand that we have limited resources. We need to share them. We need to make sure that we don't overexploit and overextract resources. That anything that we do should be about the advancement of people, the advancement of community, caring for the land and for the animals that are around us and the plants that are around us. These are things that are close to Noongar culture, but they're also close to scientific understanding. So we have that relationship. We just see it in different terms with different words.
One of the things that I was interested in reading about you both, and I'll first go to you, Jesse, is your love of reading and your love of understanding systems. And I know you have a real deep passion for constitutional law. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved in the Uluru space and the state. How did that come about? And for our listeners, what does it mean and why is it still important?
It came about because of strong female leadership. That's the honest truth. So I worked for an amazing woman, Professor Colleen Hayward, and she saw the value that I could contribute to that dialogue, and she was one of the people who nominated me. And then I also worked with Professor Megan Davis, and going to the Uluru dialogue, which was in Perth, the regional dialogue first, and just seeing that there were so many people who saw the same issues that I did, that we can't continue to live in a world of denial of the past. We can't change the past. We can't fix the errors of colonization, for example, but we can find a way to bring a sense of renewal to our social contract. Because we have a constitution. I'm going to be very honest. It's boring as a document. Yeah. It's quite boring. It doesn't guarantee us rights. It guarantees rights to the Crown. It gives consent to the Crown, but not to the people. It's a relic of a time that's passed, of an empire that's dead. So where do we bring that constitution? We've had a victory in making sure that the referendum, to make sure that we were even included in the constitution as Aboriginal people, has taken place. And that was decades ago. And we haven't made any significant progress since then. So we failed the referendum in 1999. We failed the referendum as a nation. And I say we because I mean all of us as Australians. We all collectively failed to see that through. That's not because the people have failed. It's because our leadership has failed. Our leaders didn't have the imagination to get that through. And so they all created a political issue out of both of those issues, but they're not political. Australia's sovereignty and its self-determination is not political. It's real, and it's part of a story that we all need to come to terms with. And the same with First Nations voice. But I take a lot of comfort in the fact that there are people who still want to find a way forward. And Professor Megan Davis is one of them, you know, like she could be angry at the moment. She could be mad at everybody, but she's still the one with the leading voice of love. It's the Uluru Statement from the heart. And there are a lot of critics of Professor Megan Davis. There are a lot of critics of all of us still. But the love that I see and the compassion and the conviction for this country, I don't see that from the critics. And I don't see that from anyone who just wants to safeguard and keep things the way they are. We're facing a world that's increasingly challenging. And I think we all know that. We know that Australia has been very prosperous for a long time, but we can't take it for granted. And if we see problems and suffering and injustice in our society, we have to ask ourselves individually, how are we going to act on that? And for me, the changes to the Constitution are minimal. They're just a small part of it. So yes, treaty is valuable. The constitutional changes just create a legal framework for us to deliver justice, but you can change a constitution, and then how are people's hearts going to change? It's the work that we all do daily. It's the way we treat each other on a daily basis. It's the person who stands up when they see injustice, when we see non-accountability in an organisation and non-transparency, or we just see somebody who's suffering and ask the question, why is there suffering? We're a prosperous, wealthy country, and we will be for a long time if we get things right. But that's more of a reason to stand up for people who are struggling in this country. And we may have a lot of generative wealth in our country through an economic perspective, but it doesn't trickle down into society. There are still people who can't pay their bills. There's still people living with cost of living issues. There's an energy crisis, food sustainability, and these are challenging questions. And I feel like we need to come up with answers from our community. The decisions can't just come from Canberra anymore. That's where the issues need to be signed off on, but the voice needs to be with the people. So a republic, for example, the voice is with the people. The Uluru Statement, the voice is with First Nations people. We seem to be afraid of self-determination in this country, and that, I think, has been the biggest challenge to getting these reforms passed. And people are also exhausted with the other issues they're dealing with on a daily basis.
Why is it that still in 2025, people are still feel as though it's taking something away?
This is the question that we need to find. And one of the books I'm working on at the moment is trying to find an answer to this question. And from what I've understood, it's that we've spent too much time as a country trying to bury our history. The things we don't like, we've tended to bury and walk away from instead of confronting. And I mean, in any relationship, you have to confront the things you don't like, the things that are difficult. You know, there's a difference between leaving the toilet seat up and committing serious injustices in the past, but the same argument is there. We have a conversation about it. And we have failed to have a mature conversation about it. Look at the campaign during the referendum. People bring up colonization, the most juvenile, pathetic lack of leadership from so many different politicians of different parties, different organizations. It was disappointing. And I feel like we need to have that moment where we mature as a country. And that voice, like I said, will come from community, not Canberra. Canberra should just be there to carry the voices of the people. And a republic is all about making sure that structurally, and we were talking about systems before, that voice is in community rather than in some sort of hierarchical world. And a monarchy is a hierarchy. It's a patriarchal system. In 1999, they proposed that republic referendum, which is what we call an oligarchy, that politicians would choose who they wanted to be head of state. Since then, 30 years later, the Republic movement has moved forward slightly and said, well, we'll handpick some candidates and then the people can vote for who we pick. Not good enough, guys, you know? If we're not respecting Australians and giving them the voice that they deserve, whether it's through the Uluru Statement and a First Nations voice, and also including a voice through a republic where a head of state is meant to be a first among equals and represent people, then we're failing democracy. We're failing to safeguard the future. And there's challenges. There's challenges to making sure people understand that. But you look back at the last 30 years and we haven't built a movement for a republic. So we need to seriously ask questions. Why is that and how can we get there?
One of the things I found really interesting as I was sort of involved in politics a few years ago, I was very interested in sustainability and really using Indigenous ways of understanding land, understanding power through the sun and water. And I know with your work that you are really interested in the chemistry of life and sustainability of using, converting energies. Why do you think even in 2025, scientists like yourself are still not understood and kind of embrace that looking at alternative forms of power?
I think the energy question is like there's some fundamental physics which makes converting different types of energies tricky, and then I think there's some fundamental political issues that make converting energy difficult. I think often we'll see there's that reluctance to go for renewals. There's the Nationals imploding over net zero at the moment. Shouldn't be an issue. Fundamentally, we need to do something about climate change. And we have technologies that we can use to move towards net zero, and they work really well. We're discovering new, mechanisms to convert energy, which can also move towards that. The science is moving along. It's politics that needs to catch up as well.
Having read a bit about your work, Dr. Ferrie, and I'm prefacing by saying Dr. Ferrie because I acknowledge the hard work that has taken you to achieve that goal, and I respect that. And my work in understanding, policy reform, I've been saying this telling my age since the 80s. Why do we not have people like yourself, like scientists, in political positions, like having a portfolio where you can, somebody who's learned through all systems, not just academia through Western, but I know your knowledge of Indigenous ways of culture and tech and science, deadly sciences. Why is it that in 2025 we still do not have people like yourself in a role in the government leading the way for change?
There are offices that exist, like the chief scientist, who does push for these kind of involvement of this crossover of science and policy. I think there is still that, lack of political will to listen to those voices, because you'll often see the kind of sensible scientific viewpoint overwhelmed by this very reactive, unscientific
Drivel.
Yeah.
I see you as a real power couple in terms of your love of passion of change, social change. Do you think being gay can be problematic sometimes for both of you in terms of people's reaction?
I love being gay, but yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You know, I've actually grown up in a very loving and caring family. I nearly said the word tolerant, but my family's beyond that. Tolerance is like not the same as respect. Tolerance is like when people just find a way to deal with you and pretend that there's no issue that they have with you. But I feel like I grew up in a very middle class background where everything was based on merit. And you were talking about Stuart's qualification before. That's the way I was raised as well. Merit is earned by hard work. It's not given to you or invested. Power is not invested in people in the community I grew up in. It's earned with trust and compassion. Listening to the experts is not hard. Why does everyone want to run around and think they're an expert? I don't think I'm an expert on science, but I love reading about science, and I love reading the experts and their voices and learning as much as I can in how it applies to my life. That we've lost that sense of trust in authority because this sort of false authority in the political system we were talking about has let us down.
Why do people still think that people who identify as Indigenous get an easier ride? And I've heard this, extra scholarships, easier access to get into courses and positions given to them solely based on the fact that they're Indigenous.
I have a perfect answer for this, and I don't want it to come across as aggressive or anything, but those people haven't been and seen the real country. Those people haven't gone to Indigenous communities, Cossack in Western Australia, Dumaji. These are places I've been and done research. And I'll be critical of academia too, because it has its own structural issues. There are a lot of self-appointed experts who refuse to go into communities and see real suffering. They haven't seen the true suffering, and they just assume because they see a successful Aboriginal person that, you know, we're entitled, and it's just not the case. Everyone in this country has had to work for what they've wanted, has had to work hard. That's one of the better values of being Australian, I reckon. We actually value hard work. We don't have an aristocracy here. We've never had that. We have, you got to work hard to get where you want to be, or else, you know, let somebody else do the work. Step out of the way and let somebody else do the work. For some reason, the political class hasn't caught up with that, but we're working on it, right? And the other thing is, and I'm not in any way justifying the racism, the real racism in those views, but people are doing it tough. And when people are doing it tough, they tend to take it out on each other. It's the same as you look at the world history, and whenever there's been economic tough times, people become anti-immigration. All the nasty sentiment comes up because people are actually being let down by the system that's letting us all down. We're all being let down by the same injustice. And when people finally wake up and turn around and realize, oh, you know, you're actually going through the same issues as I am, who's responsible for this? We are. We're responsible for it. The whole of society is responsible for turning around and saying enough is enough where injustice is occurring. And the people who have abused their positions of power over generations, like look at Professor Jenny Hocking's work with the National Archives, all these essential components of our society where there's just been a lack of transparency, a lack of fairness. We're getting there, but it's going to be a tough ride. All of our institutions have failed in some way. And I don't think that's unique of Australia. I think all countries need to take a look at what is fairness, what is democracy, what is truth, and we can talk about truth telling, etc., and you know, finding a way to heal as a nation. But just talking about the past and having people say, "Oh, I'm sorry that happened," is not enough. I talk about this in my book, and I was talking to Stuart about it. In a court of law, a judge doesn't just get up and say, "Oh, this criminal has done something terrible. Everyone cry and let's walk away." They don't do that. They find punitive action for injustice. They find consequences for justice. And as First Nations people, we can't just have a theatre of truth-telling and tears. we have to have more than that. We have to have real measured outcomes to tackle the injustice. And I don't have the answers to that. I think it's something we all need to come up with as Australians.
And speaking of coming up with solutions, you have worked in a space and created a website.
Yes.
And really interesting knowledges. Can you tell the audience a bit about it, please?
So it's called the Australian Prosperity Institute, and I started that with a colleague of mine, Ethan Urch, who also is in community media. And I find community media the most important part of media, because it's how we gauge what's really happening out there. You know, people living in communities with different stories. It's where we find all the talent for policy. It's where we find the answers for people who have lived the policies that they want to comment on. So we're seeking submissions, and it's all about Australia's prosperity, the way forward, moving away from the ordinary rhetoric of politics and actually asking questions about fairness, cost of living, how we live with one another on country. One of the policies we're talking about right now, because I'm more than just the Constitution, it's a very important part of it, but decentralisation, for example, how do we support people living in regional Australia? How do we encourage people to move out of the city, because our cities around the world will become overpopulated. There's nothing wrong with living in the country and living in regional Australia, and those communities need support. They need local retail, they need infrastructure, they need all the basics. And I don't think that any government has done well in our history in delivering fully to regional Australia. And I think it's created this barrier between city and regional Australia that shouldn't exist. If we want to actually move away from the politics and do something about it, Australia's for everyone. Anybody can be an Australian if they love our country and they love the land and they care for one another. You know, if we're a welcoming country in this time of crisis, that's who we should be.
What I'm loving about the website is that it allows every person, whoever you are, whatever your background, to really kind of dive in and start exploring ideas.
We want people to make a submission, and we have a way that they can on the website. And then we can make sure that writing a brief or a paper about an issue and making sure that their voice is heard. And that teaches us something too, because I don't think I'm an expert. Like, I guess I am in some areas, but no one should assume that they're just, you know, all-knowing and have all the answers to everything. And unfortunately, that's been the problem with a lot of leaders around the world at the moment. The community knows best. Scientists know best about science. Women know best about women's rights. And we as First Nations people know best about our rights. And if a structure exists to prevent people from having direct consent and control in the policies that affect them, then we're failing those communities.
This is going to be wonderful. My work at the moment with the living experience space across Australia and the First Nations building up, this is a wonderful window I can see people to look at to understand health disparity through the lens, looking at regionality. Why are we so centrically focused on building everything and creating services around one area, when in fact we are a beautiful country with beautiful, rich soils that we could, you know, and technology to guide us. Jesse, you are writing a book.
Yes.
So you mentioned, tell us a little bit about your book.
So it's called The Republic of Truth, and it does encounter a little bit of the past and some of the failures that we've had in this country, from a place of love of this country, and that's the important part. I feel like Australia is now at a point where it can't just deal with the situation anymore as is. We need to change as a country. We need to alter our constitution at some point in the future. We need to make sure that we have a directly elected head of state. We need to separate ourselves from what has governed our national identity for generations, you know, being an imperial outpost. The British Empire ended in 1997. The Crown serves no function for Australia anymore. It's basically hollow. There's no actual power to act there through Crown sovereignty. I have absolutely every love and respect for the United Kingdom, and they'll always be our allies, but that's not the argument. The argument is, why don't we have an Australian leading our country? Also, the absence of transparency and accountability in a system like Crown, where there's no real directly elected public office who we can hold to account if they do the wrong thing. All these people are appointed and handpicked, and they don't even have anything to do with the Crown. The Crown is just symbolic. And some people have used that as an argument to not change, but I think that's the biggest argument to change. Symbolism is not going to save us. Symbolism is not going to mean anything when it comes to wrongdoing or when it comes to making a decision in government. All of that has to be made through proper structure and procedure. So this book explores, you know, some of the issues, the myth about Australia, the Australia that never even existed, that people want to go back to for some reason. And the Australia we can be when we're united, when we accept that you can be from any country on earth. You can be anybody you want to be, just so long as you care for one another and you care for the country and the land, like you were talking about before. That's not a hard thing to ask for. It's a very sensible human social contract. And that is where we can go if we do the right thing, if we make the right decisions.
You know, I love going into people's lives and looking at their interests. And one of the things that intrigued me about you, Jesse, over the years is your love of artifacts. And you have a unique love of design.
Yeah.
And you have an affinity with design. Tell us a bit about this passion you have of objects and design.
It probably started with some of the things that I inherited from family. And one of them was like a little pocket watch.
Oh.
And I loved how it didn't seem relevant. Like as a watch, it was so different from everyone else's. It was a wristwatch that they all had, but it had meaning to me and it carried meaning and it was unique and it allowed me to be extra and different. But it's more than just that. I like having objects that we cherish and that we pass on because it's all about legacy. So, you know, everything's made of plastic now. Like, and plastic, you can break it easy so you don't show any care for it, right? But with a teapot, like, I have a nice teapot. That
you do.
I like my teapot.
He does, everyone. He has the best teapot.
I like my tea ceremony and I like sharing that with other people as well. And I like the ritual of it because ritual, I just criticized symbolism earlier, but it does have a place and it does have a meaning. And making sure that when I'm having a cup of tea, it connects me to all of the other times where I've felt like I've needed to continue on and have a sense of understanding, place and belonging. So teapot has been used by my grandparents. A teapot and the way that we made tea together as family when I was younger is something that I can share with other people. And I'm sure that other people feel that, you know, with some of their prized possessions too. Might seem a bit hypocritical that I'm such a socially progressive person with a silver teapot, but you know.
I'm really fascinated by your love of ceremony and symbolism, but also the use of objects from a particular period of time and what that meant in that period of time. And I'm just wondering, Stuart, as a couple, how do you negate that in your home? Like, are you of the same persuasion that your love of objects, or are you both a mesh of old and new together?
I'm not an objects person, really. Although I do enjoy a bit of kitsch every now and then. I had this great moss-covered rabbit in my previous place.
I remember the rabbit.
Yes.
And the doily that I made that went under my router.
Oh, God. I love interviewing couples sometimes because you get this real energy and how you can be two people with different ideas but coming meshed together. And together, you know, there's this type of synergy that is unique and it helps build both of you. So as we now kind of come towards the end of just a catch up, I guess, for me, I feel like it. Where does the future hold for you? Start with you first, Jesse, for the next 6 months.
The next
What's
6 months,
agenda?
getting my PhD finished so we can be equal doctors.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it takes time and it's so
does.
worth it. And also just learning to care for myself a bit more as well, because like when you're driven towards something, you can sometimes maybe not let yourself rest as much as you should, or, you know, I can be a little bit unkind to myself sometimes when I try and drive things too hard. and listening to my partner. Listening to my partner for the next 6 months will be the best thing for my life.
That's what I love to hear. And what about yourself, Stuart?
Yeah, at the moment, I'm kind of in a bit of transition, looking for work at the moment. Find a job, find a space to contribute in a meaningful way.
A senior policy advisor, especially in the areas of sustainability and environmental protections. This is your man. And I wanted to really thank both my guests, Jesse Fleay and Dr. Stuart Ferrie, for spending some time with us and really showcasing the wonderful, rich tapestry we have in Australia. Our queer academics and researchers coming together, and my love of First Nations communities. Jesse is a leading force for change in my eyes and a lot of people's eyes, and we can't wait to see what comes into the future. Thank you for spending some time with us on Channel 31, Quest by Community, Our Health Matters, because your health matters. Final words, Jesse.
Thank you. And thank you for making us feel so welcome. And we share that with you as well. We feel very happy to be here and we love you.
Oh, I love you. And
Yes, it's been great to have a chat. Thank you for having us on.
thank you, everyone, for listening.